We're working on the argument essay today, which is one half of your analytical writing score. The scores for your two separate essays, the issue and the argument essay, are averaged together to create one score. And a lot of colleges are looking for students to score a 4 out of 6 or higher. My name is Laura Aitchison, and I'm a test prep expert. I've helped over 4,000 students since 2009, and I'm really excited to be talking about the argument essay. One of the things you can keep in mind is your approach is really important. The first 3 steps here are actually going to take you about 8 minutes. Could take you as few as 5, but you don't want to take any less time than that. The reason is because if you start typing before you're ready, you're going to wind up spending more time figuring out what you're supposed to say next. The first thing you're always going to do is take a look at the prompt and then figure out what points you want to make. The way you structure your essay is going to be pretty important, especially for the argument essay that we're doing today. You're going to take the strongest part of your essay and put that as your first body paragraph, and we'll show you how to structure that. Once you start typing your essay, be on the lookout for any common grammatical errors. Make sure you avoid those. And then when you're proofreading, you're just looking for the bigger mistakes. Your essay does not have to be perfect. You only have a half an hour for it, and they don't expect it to be perfect. So you're just looking for the bigger errors. You want to demonstrate that you read it through before you submitted it. Now for this particular essay, they actually have a whole bunch of different ways they can ask the question, and one of the easiest ways to figure out how to approach this is with an actual example. So taking a look at this one, let's take a look at the instructions below the box first. It says, write a response in which you describe what specific examples or evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and how those examples or evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. So we're going to be taking a look at this particular, it's actually a request for a permit, and we're going to figure out, all right, what parts of this do we need to focus on that either need to be expanded upon or we need more information before we can figure out if this is an acceptable request. The following was written as part of an application for a permit to congregate by a religious group in the city of Gustav. We plan to meet at the Hunter Pavilion on the north side of the park. We expect about 200 attendees. Although we do plan to celebrate our message in words and song, we will be mindful of others who are sharing the park on that day. We have found that in the past, when our group meets in a public space, we run the risk of harassment by those who do not agree with our message. Therefore, we would like to hire 5 security officers to protect our congregants from religious intolerance. We would like to post 1 guard at the entrance to the park and others who will dress in plain clothes at the perimeter of our gathering. We hope you understand and will endorse this request. So we've got a couple of different things that are going on here. This group seems to have issues with tolerance. They don't disclose what type of religious group they are, but we want to think about this from the city's perspective. So we're going to take this apart and figure out which points we want to discuss. There's going to be more than enough material for you, and you don't want to discuss everything. You only have 30 minutes. So when you're thinking about what points you want to make, think about the ones that are the easiest to explain. So here, looking at the left-hand side, we have 5 different assumptions, and we want to think about things that would strengthen that assumption and things that would weaken that assumption, each one. So the first assumption is the harassment this group has experienced in the past warrants private security guards. Otherwise, this permit doesn't make any sense. There's no reason they should have security guards if there's no threat. So it would be helpful to know if this group has experienced potentially dangerous harassment in the past. If they haven't, if they've never had a reason to worry about security and safety, then this permit doesn't make a lot of sense, and that would weaken their argument and they could be denied their permit. Another assumption is that the police are not capable of handling the situation on their own without additional help. So we're thinking that this is a city that has police. Most cities do. I would certainly hope that this is one of them. So in order for them to want to hire outside help, they're saying that the police force isn't enough. So if it isn't enough, then that strengthens the argument. So the police force is not equipped to patrol the park in the way the group requires. That would strengthen it. However, if the police force is capable of maintaining the peace without additional support, then that would weaken their argument. Another assumption is that using private security in this public park is legal. So they're asking for this permit, but it's possible that it's against the rules or laws. So It would strengthen their argument if there are rules and or laws that allow private security, and then it would certainly weaken and perhaps completely break the idea if it is either specifically restricted, that's one idea, or if it's unprecedented, that's another issue. If it's never been done before, they might need some additional paperwork filed since they don't have any examples of it. The group has a right to gather in this public place. This one is hopefully true, and actually you'll see in our sample essay that the author discusses how if this is a group that's gathering in the United States, then yes, there are historical and legal precedents. If this group is not allowed to gather in public places, but it is the United States, it's possible that this group has violated something in the past, and that certainly would weaken their argument, and they wouldn't be allowed regardless. And then the final assumption you might want to think about is using private security is safer than letting the local police handle the situation. So it's possible private security is better trained, but it's also possible the police are better trained. And really, given the amount of information that was provided, we would have no idea. So it's your job to look at this and think, okay, well, it's not completely invalid. Every argument is going to have something about it that makes sense. There are, however, going to be issues with it, and it's your job to figure out what they are and which ones you want to discuss. The essay template is super, super helpful. If you know where things are supposed to go, your job is just to pick out which ones you want to put where and then follow the template. It's so much easier to do it that way than to try to do it completely on your own without a framework in mind. So for paragraph 1, you're going to paraphrase the argument, and it seems like you could just assume that the grader knows what the argument is. The grader does. The grader also has to know that you know what you're talking about. So make sure that you paraphrase the argument so that you can demonstrate you understood what's happening, and then summarize the goal of your essay, because the instructions, depending on which instructions you get, which type of prompt you get, you want to make sure you're following it. So students who have done quite a few essays as practice, you want to be super careful and make sure you know which type of instructions you're looking at, and make sure you state that when you're doing your intro paragraph. That way the grader knows you know what you're talking about. Now for paragraph 2, most important assumption goes first. Second important assumption goes next. And then in our sample essay, you'll find that the student who wrote this essay wasn't able to find time and or room. Of course, you're typing it on a computer, so technically there is room. But this student didn't have the time to put in a third body paragraph, which is 100% fine. Especially with the argument essay, you're going to find that 4 paragraphs is often plenty. With the issue essay, students find that if they write 5 paragraphs, they often score higher. In your final paragraph, and you don't want to leave out a conclusion, please don't. Make sure you conclude by summarizing your main points. If you don't have a conclusion paragraph, it indicates that you didn't budget your time well, which could lead the grader to believe that you didn't practice ahead of time. And that's certainly not something we want the grader to be thinking. Now let's put in some ideas from the chart that we had about the assumptions into our template here. So when we paraphrase the argument is the group should be allowed to carry out all the written requests. That's what they're saying. In the permit, they're saying, we want to do this. And then we have to state what the directions were. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is that if you can figure out some historical or legal precedent, like the U.S. Constitution, that's going to really help the argument if you're arguing for it. You want to make sure that you are using the most important assumption in your first body paragraph. That's the first thing that the author or the grader sees, and you want to pick out what the author said that is as compelling as possible, but still has some ambiguity to it, meaning they sound like they have a great idea, but you're going to need more information about it, and that is true of every argument that you're going to see on test day. You want to put your second most exciting, I know, it's super exciting to write this essay, but the next most important assumption, and then as I said before, this student wasn't able to fit in a third body paragraph, so the student went right to the conclusion.